Never apologize for crying in the office. I've cried in the office. This is a sign of your passion, which is your superpower. The worst CEOs believe in one form of governance, which is, dictatorship. I'm gonna, my way or the highway. If you want to survive, you got to open your mind up and open your heart up. What could I have done differently and behavior differently that maybe he would have reconsidered for a minute before he put that gun in his mouth? Could I have done something? Could I have said something? Could I have reached out to him? Could I have whatever? I'm racked with a degree of guilt every day of my life. And suicide hangs with families. I find suicide, because of the knock-on effect, to be the most horrendous, and it does not get the attention it needs. It does not get the love it needs. And I do live every day of my life trying to say, be kind to everyone, because you don't know what they're going through.
Welcome back to The Mental Space. Now, if you're a CEO out there and you haven't yet got the message about well-being in the workplace, today's guest is a man who's been living and breathing this mission for more than a decade. My guest today on The Mental Space is James Lafferty, who is the CEO of Fine Hygienic Holdings, but his story is much deeper than that. James, welcome to The Mental Space.
Well, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Now, we always start off with our guests and go, right, Marvel superhero origin story. Give us a little part of history, because I read your bio and I've got to say, the imposter syndrome kicked right in reading some of the things that's in your background.
Well, I'm a big believer in serendipity, which is life doesn't turn out the way you think. I was a big sports fanatic, and all I wanted to do was coach, teach, and make no money whatsoever. And so that was the path I was on. I studied.
Seems like an ambition that can be achieved.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was coaching youth track and field in the U.S., and I loved it. I was quite successful at it. I found I was good at motivating high-risk youth to listen to me. So instead of getting pregnant, drugs, crime, listen to me, run. I'll help you get a college scholarship. We can change your life. And people found that an inspirational vision. And as part of the side building a career, and I was finishing university, I studied psych and physiology. I wasn't a business major. What I did was I also started a company, and this is the beginning of corporate wellness back in 1983, 84. Wow. And companies were just starting the concept of a healthy employee is a good employee. And there was a company in my hometown, Cincinnati, Ohio, in the U.S., Procter & Gamble. They've always been a bit forward-thinking. And so they were the first client I had. And I was teaching wellness classes to their executives, and we had a program called a fitness prescription, which I looked at their diet and stress management and exercise, and we wrote a program. And then we would take like 6 sessions to get them on their own and then let them go. And I had this guy, and one of the things we did was we measured body fat, which is the most accurate way to look at body composition. If I put you on a scale, I mean, you're an athletic, muscular guy. You might be overweight, but you're not over fat. And so the medical community developed this thing called BMI, or body mass index. BMI is almost as useless as weight, because it's still, if you're muscular, you're too big. Yeah. The only accurate way to assess body composition is to measure body fat, and there's different techniques. Now, what we use, and I still use this to this day with athletes, is skin fold calipers, where you're taking folds on different parts of the body, you plug them into an algorithm. And what I had to do was tell these people, look, you gotta get down to your boxers. And you take these senior executives at P&G, and they're in their suit and tie, they're pretty cocky. You take them down to their underwear, and suddenly they're a bit nervous, and the emperor has no clothes. And yeah, so this guy says to me, he's babbling on, I'm measuring his fat, and he says, you ought to do what I do. I've gotten to know you, you can do what I do. And I said, what do you do? And he said, I'm in brand management. And I said, what in the world is brand management? He explained it to me. I liked it, and I listened to him, and he said, I can set you up to see if you're qualified. I took these tests, I did screening interview, and then we did the full interview to see if I would get a job. And in the full interview, I guess I didn't do that well, because after a week, I got a letter that said, we loved you, but we don't love you enough to make you an offer. Now, I grew up in a world that you could challenge anything. So I wrote a letter back to P&G and saying, I want another shot. And they were so flabbergasted that they gave me a second shot. And so I came back 3 or 4 weeks later for another set of interviews with 3 different people. And lo and behold, in that interview, they made me an offer. And so I left the fitness center at $5 an hour. And I became a marketing assistant and then got promoted up and then went overseas. In Morocco first, and then Central and Eastern Europe, and I moved around all over the place to different continents, and eventually made it to CEO level roles in Procter, then in Coke, then in BAT, and now in Fine. And so, my story is one of, it's about desire and fighting for things that you believe in. I believed in myself, and they said no, and I said, well, I'm not accepting your no, and you got to fight back. And to this day, when young people write me and say, I applied in your company and I got told no, but I think you made a mistake, I always tell HR, bring them back, because they've got that intangible. Desire is more important than anything else. And I also believe in the power of going to great companies like a P&G, like a Fine, that invest in your training and development, because I was a $5 an hour fitness instructor and they turned me through training and development into a CEO. So I owe them a lot. And that's my story. And so I've always stayed a bit humble because I started at the bottom. I believe in treating everybody with dignity and respect, and everybody's important. I never expected to do this. So, I feel very blessed and I'm very humbled, and I keep my humble roots.
So, 1983, where depressingly, 40 years on, where do you think we are in terms of the corporate world and understanding this message of treat people right and treat people with respect? Because we launched on World Mental Health Day with the mission of tackling the stigma of mental health. It's still needed in the world today, and you've been on this mission for 40 years. Where do you think we're at? And when do you think CEOs are going to wake up to the power of leaning into that?
Well, I think things have improved quite a bit. You have to look at it in context. If you say versus nirvana and where we want to be, we're light years away. But versus where we were, we've made tremendous gains. And that's in looking at the total employee and treating the employee as a partner and not as a adversary. I mean, when I started, there were people that treated the employee like these big bad employees are out to get us. It's like, wow. And I think a number of things have changed and improved. The offerings, the programs. It's a whole different world. I mean, everyone has a corporate wellness program. Back then, I was one of the first to even offer those to anybody. So it's made progress, but we're a long ways to go. And I would put mental health at even farther behind, because it did start with a physical health aspect. There might be certain pieces, like I was teaching 40 years ago stress management, but that was really the limit of the mental health aspect. Everything else was physical. It was dietary and it was exercise, and do you want to jog or not jog, or swim laps. I mean, it was very physical health based. Now is where we're really seeing this arrival of treating mental health equally. And as I was talking to my board the other day, I said we have to look at different aspects of health, and we have to have a menu for all of them. You have to have a menu for physical, and you have to have a menu for mental health, and you have to respect that people are allowed to make their own choices. That's why we need a menu. And too many people are looking at this cookie cutter approach and saying, you have to do this or that. You don't have to do that. I offer all of this. Like, we have a counseling program we offer to everyone, but I don't force people. It's a personal choice. It's okay. We pay for it. And for you and your family, it can be also family members, but it's not something that you have to do. When I came in the company with my fitness background, one of our employees in Saudi asked me, are you going to force us all to exercise? And I said, no. I said, no, I'll encourage it, and I'm here to help you. And if you have questions, I will certainly do everything I can to help you. My wife who's a dietitian, nutritionist, has put many of our employees on nutritional programs, and they've had weight loss and improved health. But we didn't go and say, you have to call my wife. They ask, can I avail of it? We say yes, and then it's all private and confidential. I think what the best companies have to do is offer a menu to people like a restaurant does, and you pick, and no matter what you pick, it's right for you.
Now, that's an interesting question because there needs to be an element of trust both ways, isn't there? The employees need to be able to trust that if they do select from the menu, then actually their choice is not going to be used against them.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the possibly the downfalls right now with whether it be EAPs, employee assistance programs, or any of these wellness things. The employees have got to trust. That then comes back to culture and the culture you build in the company. How much is your background as that coach who was able to work with kids from difficult backgrounds and get them to sort of listen and engage with you? How much has that helped you build trust as a CEO? Or how is that? Have you always believed in that culture of team?
Well, it's a really good question. So I honestly believe when I came into P&G, I was 22 and I was a bit stunned. The people that were these bosses, when I came into marketing, some of these brand managers, they really sucked at managing people. They just sucked. And I might have been a kid and way below them, but I realized already, having worked with high-risk youth and having to convince them, I was much better at inspiring and building a team than these guys. They might have their MBA and they might have all this experience, but they really still suck. There's a part of learning, and there's also a part of being a bit intuitive. EQ has an element of intuitiveness to it. I think it helped me quite a bit, and I've always believed in authenticity. So I admit, like, I cried in this. I've never had to play these games. Like, I admit I needed help, or I admit I cried, or I admit it's okay. I admit I made this mistake. I admit I screwed this thing up in my marriage. I admit these things because that's a sign of strength. The sign of weakness is when you have to cover everything up. And so I believe when these people come forward, like a Naomi Osaka, it's actually incredibly courageous. It's not a declaration of, people look and say, this is a declaration of weakness. It's a declaration of strength. And so when I step forward and say, it's okay to cry, like there's one of my former employees has this bestseller book, Dare to Lead Like a Girl. And she tells this story about the first time she cried in P&G, and I told her, don't ever, and she started apologizing to me, and this was 25 years ago, and I said, never apologize for crying in the office. I've cried in the office. This is a sign of your passion, which is your superpower. She's now written a whole book about that whole incident that changed her life, and say, what's wrong with showing emotion in the office? We're humans. We're not supposed to turn robotic when we come in the door. So I have kept grounded on that. I completely agree with you on the trust piece. And I'll tell you a little anecdote. When we had the mental health providers that we bring in are sworn to secrecy. Now, they did give us some statistics. And one time they gave a statistic of one employee had reported that they were looking at self-harm, like maybe cutting their wrist or things. And this person came to me and said, we have to force them to disclose the name. I said, you're out of your mind. Yeah, but we have an obligation. I said, you can't tell people we respect your choices and we keep it anonymous, except if we don't like what you have to say, and then we'll go and buy. I said, you will destroy the whole trust in the program. We have to respect that they are allowed to state how they're feeling, and that the professionals involved will handle that. But you can't say we have a right to barge in and demand information that we've already signed a non-disclosure agreement. You can't do that. So trust is a very delicate matter. One bad move by me, and I can destroy the trust that was built up over years. So
it's easy to break.
You have to watch this. Yeah. Yes.
Fascinating you talk about emotional, crying in the office. If we look at the evolution of leadership, and I think, again, your background as a coach and your background from sports possibly gives you an inside track on this. But we've gone from even the definition of CEO from being chief executive officer, meg the P&L, don't care how you do it, to now we've got chief empathy officer, chief emotional officer. And even if we looked at McKinsey, Hard-Bitten Management Institute, last year they were writing about the alpha qualities, quite masculine language, but the alpha qualities needed to succeed for leaders moving forward. You looked at each of them, it was all EQ, it was all emotional intelligence, which for a lot of leaders out there is quite a frightening time because they were never taught this. They never learned how to lead as a coach. They never had to put themselves forward and be vulnerable or indeed inspire. So what's your message to those CEOs that are looking at it and they feel kind of threatened? Like you say, they hide behind this mask of putting people down because they're not actually secure enough in themselves to go, do you know what? I don't have all the answers. Let's work this through together.
My advice would be if you don't get on that program, you won't make it. Because you go back 40, 50 years, the pool of CEO candidates was narrow. Okay, women were excluded. Yeah. It was basically a certain markets. And so if you were a white male coming from a certain thing, you had a shot. With the globalization of business and the move to diversity and the value of diversity, and that a CEO can come from anywhere. Yeah. I mean, you don't have to be born in the United States or born in Europe to be a CEO. And they can come from anywhere. I can point CEOs coming from all over the world who are just fabulous. The competition now is so intense that if you want to stay in the old system, you just won't make it. It's as simple as that. It's about survival. If you want to survive, you got to open your mind up and open your heart up. And for me, I've always viewed the organization as an extension of how I would treat like my family. And as a father of 6, there's enough training. I got 6 kids. Last time I read your bio, it was 5. So. Yeah, it must be the old bio. There's another one. Another one joined. So I'm at 6, and you say, look, I think we all have the ability to drive our EQ and improve on it and learn from it. And we certainly learn that with our own children where, you're not the hero at home. You don't have just power, You can't make a 3-year-old through orders follow what you want to do. And every parent knows that. Absolutely. And so you say, I try to always think in the context of even my own kids and how I talk to people, how I interact with people. Now, there are times and places where you have to give an order. Yeah. And you make it clear, but there's also times to listen. And there's also times to practice democracy and practice other forms, not just dictatorship. The worst CEOs believe in one form of governance, which is dictatorship. I'm gonna my way or the highway. Yeah, that hierarchical. There is a time for that. There are times in certain projects where everybody's in debate, and the CEO has to step up and decide. That's true, yeah. But it's not everything. You have to practice different forms, just like you would with your spouse or your children. You practice different forms of governance and different forms of working with people, and the CEO is the same, and you have to be open to that.
Do you mind me asking the age ranges of your kids?
It's unbelievable. 37 to 1.
To 1. Boys and girls?
3 boys, 3 girls.
Okay, so you're learning lessons all over the place right now.
Absolutely.
So as a father then, when you look at the world, and the reason why I'm going to it's almost like a controversial topic right now. We wrote a little piece about Gen Zs coming into the workplace now. When your 37-year-old came into the world of work, or when you came into the world of work, it's a very different environment now for the kids coming into the world of work now. Increased productivity, always on culture, 25/8, never off technology, all that sort of thing. What do you think about the world of work that your children are entering now, and how do you hope it's going to change looking forward to that when your 1-year-old gets to that point?
That's a fabulous question. Look, I still think the fundamentals of success are unchanged, despite all the tech. We've had many, many changes in many ways, but you still have to work hard, and there's no getting around that. Yeah. You still have to pay a price. I mean, I'll give you. Let's talk about stress. Stress is one thing. Absolutely. First of all, physiologically, as a physiologist, the body needs stress to grow. And that's when you grow, either muscularly, you must stress the muscle for it to undergo adaptive change. Yeah. The brain is the same. You learn through stress. I mean, when we were all in school, it wasn't a stress-free to take a test. But I will see people on LinkedIn say every employer should offer a stress-free environment. And this is where it's gone way over way beyond reality. It's not possible. We still have to make a profit. We still have to pay people. I still have to make the payroll. I still have to look at cash flow, and I have to worry about it. I can't go and say, I want to be the CEO of the company, but I don't want you to stress me out. This is immaturity. And so you still have to manage stress. Despite that we know it can be bad and too much can be bad, and I don't want people overly stressed out. But I'm sorry, if you take a C-suite role, you have to be prepared to take the grief. You can't say, I want it all. I want that, and I want, I coach these Olympic athletes. I've never had anyone say to me, I want to be an Olympic athlete, win a gold medal, but I don't want to train and I want to eat ice cream every day. They don't say that because they understand there's a price and that they have to pay an enormous price. To win an Olympic medal, you give up everything. Now, if it's not worth it, then don't do it. But they don't go and say, life isn't fair. I should be offered the ability to win an Olympic gold and not have to really sacrifice anything.
Is there a distinction that those athletes are pursuing something of meaning and purpose, and it's their choice? Now, you're right when you talk about not being stressed at work. That's not realistic. How do we create, because if you've got that sense of meaning, you've got that sense of purpose, that the stress levels are not the same. It's a different experience. We show up with a different perception. And then, is it stress all the time, or is it short periods of stress? How do you optimize your employees? Because you're not for a minute telling me that your employees are all stressed all the time, and that stress is actually good for them, and therefore they're performing at their best.
It's a delicate judgment. What I try to do is I want people to grow. Yeah. And I believe when people are growing, they're happier. Yeah. And even though they might go through it, like when I was away at school and I cried and called my mom and dad and they said, you're not coming home. And I was so upset because I wanted to. But then later I did grow. I'm always appreciative of that. Yeah. Growth is not always fun. No. Now, I do have a role here and an obligation of people to grow. And that means sometimes it will be very difficult. Now, there's a judgment call. I don't want them to always be like that. And I want them to have the breaks, and there's balance, and there's celebration, there's everything. Is there a formula I can give? No, it's a feel. It's a what do you think? And it's just like my own kids. I have sometimes busted their butt, and then other times I put my arm around them and give them a hug, and I say I love you, and let's go out and see a movie, and let's go have some pizza. It's based on judgment. It can't be all one thing or the other. It's a balance. And so, we try. If I rarely, like Rose could tell you, will say to her, I'm really sorry to send this to you on a weekend. I just want to ask this quick question. Then I ask the question, and then I apologize again. Now, you could say, well, you're a horrible boss. You wrote to her on a Saturday. I don't want to. But sometimes you just do, and sometimes the board is working 7 days a week. I mean, you just had the head of EMAR come out, it was in the paper today, he said, my advice is you gotta work hard 7 days a week, and don't talk to me about remote work. Just the headline I just read an hour ago. He said 7 days a week, that's what we gotta do, and everybody's gotta get on the program, 7 days a week of work. I'm gonna be very interested to see the reaction to this headline. Because it's after now. I don't believe in that, and I want to respect people's family time. Yeah. And I can give you messages in the last 24 hours. We have a company-wide meeting once a month on the numbers in the month. One of my country general managers, his boss, wrote to me last night, 15 minutes before, and said, can he skip out? He wants to take his mom back to the doctor. My answer back was, his mom is the priority.
I know you've spoken about this. I watched you on stage about 10 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, from one of your previous videos. At that point, and I totally agree and subscribe, and that's one of the reasons why I left the corporate world to set up my own thing, because I've got a 7-year-old girl. That ability to be there for your family, put your family first, how important is that? Because you spoke about, your son only graduates one time. We get X amount of family holidays. We get X amount of Christmases before Christmas isn't the thing it was when they were little.
Totally right.
So just elaborate.
I don't think a day is equal to a day is equal to a day. Yeah. There's what I'm a big proponent of is there are defining moments in life where your family needs to know that they're number one. Yeah. Now, that can be a birthday. That can be, I need to take my mother to the hospital. Mm-hmm. My mother needs me, and I'm the oldest son. We see that, and I want him to be there for his mom. And you know what? We'll cover for you. Don't worry about it. But not every day. I mean, that doesn't mean that I'll never do business travel because I want to be home for every dinner. But what it does mean is like, one of my daughters has had her birthday. I had to change the whole travel plan to be on her birthday on that day. And I moved everything around because I can travel on certain days and they understand. But on birthday, Dad needs to be there. And so my advice to everybody is know those defining moments, the family events, the school meetings with teachers, this big sports event where they're playing in front of you, the school play. I mean, I had a woman once working for me, and she says to me, we had a meeting, and she says, I just want to check how long the meeting is. Is it really going to be an hour? And I said, yeah, I think, but what's going on? She said, well, my daughter's got the lead in the school play. It starts at 3, and I want to be there. And I looked at her, and I said, let me be very clear. When your daughter looks off stage, she needs to see Mom 100%. So if you don't go early, I will carry you myself and put you in my car and drive you to the recital hall because I'm not going to allow you to miss her opening night of the school play where she has the lead. You don't even have to ask. This is way too important. And when I'm dealing with a 45-year-old general manager in a country whose mom is probably in her mid-70s and she needs help, you don't even have to ask. We clear the decks. And that's what you got to do now. But it doesn't mean that you never do anything or you never travel or you don't miss a family dinner. You're going to miss some of that stuff.
But that's where we're at right now, isn't it? In that management and leadership's tendency is very much fluid situation in which now, rather than have our employees in one place all the time and they just do as they're told, we now have to make incremental decisions all the way. So management and leadership is tougher than it's ever been. Looking at the bio again, Olympic coach.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an interesting, not everyone has that in their background. How has that helped you be a better leader?
You're dealing with the most elite individuals that have reached the top of their profession. I mean, the pole vaulter I work with very closely, E.J. Obiene, he's number 3 in the world. I mean, he is the 3rd best in his profession on the globe. I mean, can I say I'm the 3rd best? And I don't think I can make such a statement. Not even close. So, you learn from people who reach the top of their profession, and you learn reapplicable principles that you can take to the business world. Because what it takes to become the best in your profession is the same whether you're in the music or you're in the arts or you're in sports or you're running a business. And so those principles are the same. And it's a huge learning for me to go through with him, to have the discussions that we have because he has given up his whole life. There's no cheat meals. There's no, I'm going to just have pizza tonight. No, nothing. It's 24/7. His whole life is training. There's no going out with your friends and having fun. Nothing. He's 27 years old. I mean, he's got other interests in his life. But if you want to win at that level, there's someone else. And that's what people don't get. You always have to step back and say, in an ideal world, I want to be able to get all this and not sacrifice too much. I agree, I understand. But the problem is, as long as there's other people who are prepared to give up everything, you're tough luck. I mean, that's the way it goes. So in the world of sports, which is a very brutal world that teaches you principles that many business people don't get. I'll give you an example, the Sisyphus principle. Sisyphus from Greek mythology was told by the gods, you have to roll the stone up to the top of the hill and it rolls back, and you do it over and over again. Now, I fire someone who's 20 years in the company. They always say the same thing. How can you fire me? I gave the company 20 years of my life. And they live off the past. They say, 10 years ago, I was employee of the year. Yeah, that was 10 years ago. See, the athletes inherently understand you have to re-earn it every day. If you won the last Olympics, doesn't mean anything. You have to re-earn it again. You can't go and say, give me the gold medal because I won the last two. They say, no, you have to re-earn it. And there's this constant understanding that if you let go for a second, you fall behind. Business people often don't get it. They think, I've fired so many people, and that you ask me, why do 50-plus-year-olds get fired? It's not age discrimination. The number one reason, they go to sleep. I earned my right to let off the gas because I gave this company so much. There's no credit system in business. You got paid, you got promoted, you got bonuses. Company owes you nothing. As long as you got paid, they owe you nothing. You didn't work for free. There's no crediting in business. I had an all-time record year in 2022 in this company. If I blow 2023, I'm out of a job. Look at the sports world. These football coaches in the English Premier League, they win the EPL, and then the next year they start off losing 10 in a row. They're fired. The guy just won. But the owners decide, you know what? We're not on the right track now. We need to change. There's incredibly relevant learnings that you can bring, and it makes me a better leader, and it also makes me a better individual by working with an elite in another part of life. Now, that could be, again, in music, in the arts, in ballet. I happen to work with Olympic-level track and field athletes, but the learnings are massive in how they're reapplied, and that's why I use those analogies. I bring them in to talk to the team. I use them as teaching tools because of the lessons that come out of it.
So, highly competitive environment. Work will always be a highly competitive environment. How do you avoid falling into the trap of creating toxic workplaces then? Because you want people to show up and be their best. And some of the language you've just used has been also used in toxic workplaces. What's the difference? What's the quality? What's the secret sauce? That means this is a highly optimized, highly innovative, competitive team that wants to achieve the best, to this is the team that's been told they have to achieve the best, and the minute that they're off their game, they're out. So where's the balance again?
Yeah, but I wouldn't even remotely agree that holding high standards creates a toxic environment. I make no apologies for holding a high standard, and I believe that good people want to be stretched and reach their full potential, and that creates happiness, and that creates pride in self, and saying I did that. Now, toxic work environment is, for me, all kinds of things. It's politics. Okay. It's playing favorites. It's creating a different set of rules, lack of fairness. It's having all kinds of things that create people to be uncertain and unclear about how it works. Now, this is a for-profit company that has shareholders and everything. Yeah. Do we go and fire the minute you don't deliver? No, of course not. We forget, but if it's a consistent, it could happen. And I understand that. And I got fired in my life. P&G fired me for missing my numbers after 25 years. I didn't cry.
What did that teach you?
It taught me that the rules do apply to everybody. I thought maybe because I had taken all these different assignments that I'd get like a forgiveness. Didn't happen. It also taught me that I'm glad that I carried myself and was my own person, because when you go out, you either go out on your knees or you go out on your feet. And I went out on my feet. And I walked out with my head held high, and I did it my way. Yeah. And I was proud, because a lot of people sacrifice who they are and they wear masks. And then they get fired and you say, I lost myself and I lost my job. See, in that particular situation with Procter & Gamble, they fired me. I lost my job, but I never lost myself.
That's interesting, because we have got this. It seems like there is a crisis of self-respect out there right now.
Big time.
And if we look at that, again, if you last in a job 3 weeks, but you're yourself and you keep living to your values, then you're in a much better space than the 20-year treadmill. I mean, it feels like, we talk about the pandemic. If we go back to the pandemic, there was a lot of people that woke up during the pandemic and went, 20 years, this isn't who I am. This isn't what I should have been doing. How have you navigated that over the years? Like, there must have been times when it was challenging, when your values were challenged, or is that just the way you're wired?
No, there was lots of times. I did leave one job on an ethical basis. My personal value system was questioned. I've offered my resignation on multiple occasions because I won't be a part of, that I'm going to draw the line. And see, I have a competitive edge over most people in my place. If you paid $50,000 or $100,000 to go to Harvard and get an MBA, you're supposed to be the CEO. And there's this pressure, like you're competing with your graduating class at Harvard, and everyone's looking at who's got the highest and who might be making the most. Yeah. I'm a psych and physiology major from the University of Cincinnati. I was making $5 an hour. I expected to make $20,000 a year and be happy. See, I never needed this. And so I've always had this power and ability to say, I can go back and cut. That's what I was going to do anyway.
Does that gratitude, is it gratitude for where you are today?
It's gratitude and humility combined into one, because it's saying this wasn't my game plan in life. And I'm very blessed that it's turned out this way. I explained to every kid I teach a college class to, I said, there's 3 ways your life's going to turn out. You all got dreams, right? Here's how it's going to end up. Some of you're going to miss your dreams by a mile. So let's take a guy in prison today. Ask him, did you have a dream to be an inmate in prison when you were a kid? And they'll say, no, I wanted to be an astronaut. Or I would say, okay, you're pretty far. You're locked up. Why? Choices. Then group 2 is the majority of the world. They don't hit their dreams, but they come close. They don't marry the girl they wanted to marry, but they marry one that looks like her. They don't live on X street, but they live 7 streets down. They don't work at Procter & Gamble, but they work at Unilever. It comes close. And then there's this very select third group.
I feel that there's a legal disclaimer I need to stick in there at some point. Anyway, carry on.
The third group, you have a set of dreams in life far exceeds whatever you thought was going to happen. And I'm in that group. And that comes through, again, fundamental principles of perseverance, of risk, especially risk-taking.
Which gets harder and harder.
The risk-taking is everything. And I tell young people, I just wrote an article on it on LinkedIn that it's had tens of thousands of views. I say, look, when I was finally offered to leave Cincinnati, my home, I wanted it until they offered it. Then when they offered it, I'm like, home looks really good. I was going to turn it down. And the 65-year-old sales manager comes to my office. He says, I want you to look at me. I'm 65. Do you know what I regret in my life? All the risks I didn't take. Yeah. He said, get on the plane to Africa and do this thing. And he convinced me. And I learned a huge lesson, which was take the new assignments. When I meet people here in like Dubai, and this is an amazing place to live, but they refuse to leave, and they refuse to, it's a very self-limiting, you should go and see the world. You can always move back to Dubai. It's an amazing place, but you don't have to mandate, I will be here from now until I'm dead. Why?
Which is interesting, because with such a large expat population, many of us have already made quite a leap into the unknown. So there must be some sense of adventure in there somewhere.
Sure, but you can lose these things. You can lose these things. I mean, people lose their enthusiasm. I've told a number of people that I've known over like a 30-year period, I've told them, you've become much more caustic and pessimistic with age. I just need to tell you, you're not the person I knew. When you were 30, you saw the good in things. Now there's much more pessimism. Why do we talk about grumpy grandpa or grumpy grandma? There's a certain, people do change. So that you might have had someone come here from, let's say, Western Europe, and they took this leap, but then they settled into a comfort zone. And what made them take that leap, it's still in their body somewhere, but it's latent, it's dormant.
Within all that, and you talk about people changing their attitudes. When you look at your kids, and I'm sort of talking as father's father, where are you at on the media and social media and its impact on our kids?
I'm terrified all the time. And I don't even know if I have a good answer. I can't keep them off, the younger ones.
Yeah.
A 37-year-old, he makes his choices. I'm a grandfather. He's got kids, but I don't know how to handle it. I feel so bad. I've always defended millennials. When these people that came out and attacked millennials, like they're all weak and all this, I say, stop. When I was in high school and we did stupid stuff, there was not a single picture. There's only us sitting to this day around a table laughing about, do you remember when he pulled his pants down and ran naked through the street? All these things, that stupid stuff that I did, and you didn't think about it's going to impact the rest of my life. These kids today, they do something dumb that I did, and it's put on YouTube with 1 million views, and they commit suicide. I feel for kids today. They have the scrutiny on their hand, like one posting in social media can ruin a kid, and they think that their life is over. There's a suicide in the U.S. of a teen from a bullying on social media every week or two. I mean, this is sad.
I got a boy back in the UK. Boy, he's just started his first job, but 19 to 25, second biggest killer of young men, suicide.
Yeah.
And if this was a physical disease, we'd be spending millions on this research and what's going on.
Absolutely. Absolutely spot on. I won't go into great detail, but I've had 2 major suicides in my family, including one like 4 months ago. And, one I was deeply involved in and was there and everything. It's one of the most untalked, unsupported diseases out there, and it's a tragedy beyond belief. And what happens when someone, I've had people in my family die of Alzheimer's and cancer and different things. These are all grief-stricken. It's all grief-stricken, and I'm upset. Like my sister passed away from cancer, and I'm upset.
Yeah.
But there's a certain fate element. You say, okay, this happened, and we don't know why and all that. The suicide, especially the one, that happened when I was 17. He was 19. In my family, I'm still guilty every day. Could I have done something differently? And this was back to he killed himself in August of 1980. My nephew, we were like brothers. He committed suicide in August of 80. Here we are in the early months of 2023, 43 years later. I think about him every day, and I still always wonder, what could I have done differently and behavior differently that maybe he would have reconsidered for a minute before he put that gun in his mouth? Could I have done something? Could I have said something? Could I have reached out to him? Could I have whatever? I'm racked with a degree of guilt every day of my life, and suicide hangs with families forever. So the people have to tolerate that and live with it, and that's why I find suicide to be. I'm not trying to have a contest to what's the worst thing, because all death is sad and all death should try to be avoided at all risks. But I find suicide, because of the knock-on effect, to be the most horrendous, and it does not get the attention it needs. It does not get the love it needs. And I do live every day of my life trying to say, be kind to everyone, because you don't know what they're going through. And it's possible that something that I said or did took someone who was on the edge and they stepped back from the edge. Now, I don't know that, but that's my hope. And that, maybe there's one person or two people or whatever that say, just when I thought everything was done and my only choice was, suicide, someone did this and that. And, I've had some of my kids, one child in particular, huge depression and suicide questions. And the explanation she gave me on suicide was absolutely mind-blowing. She said, when you go back to 9/11 and people were jumping out of the buildings, they didn't want to die. But when you have flames licking at your back and you have there's one direction, you're picking lesser too. She said, Dad, I'm in places where I don't want to die, but suicide looks really attractive relative to the options in my head at that point in time. When she gave me the 9/11, because I remember watching that footage of those people falling over and over, they didn't want to do that. But what do you, if it's fire or that, at least you buy yourself a bit of time and you don't have that pain of the burn. When she gave me that analogy, my daughter, it snapped, and I said, I understand now. I understand deeply your things, and then how can I help? And bringing her back from the precipice, she was raped, and the rape led to a sequence of events, and it went into depression, and she had suicidal thought, but she at least talked to me and said, I feel. But I lived in terror. I used to come home to the house, and I was terrified I would find her hanging. I just lived in terror. Yeah. These parents that have gone through it, my sisters went through it, my nephew, my sister's son died, suicide, gunshot. We have in the family. I have nothing but energy and sympathy and emotion to do everything possible in what we can do to alleviate that. And I'm open to anything from the therapy to other programs, to outreach programs, to interventions, to what does it take to get someone to see hope again? And what does it take to bring them back from that? And if I'm really very honest, and I've talked to a lot of people, the vast majority of the world I've talked to have had at some point in time suicidal thoughts. There's nothing wrong with it. And they thought this is a way to avoid X or Y. We have to make it okay to talk about. We have to make it okay to help people. We have to do this. And I'm one of these people, like so many, I'm guilty that I didn't do enough for my nephew. And we were tight. And he killed himself, and I was there. I mean, not at the moment, but I was around, and this thing happened to my family. What could I have done? And it'll never stop till the day I die. I'll always wonder what I could have done differently.
When one of the foundations of what we're trying to do at Mental is get people to talk about this,
yes, to
normalize this conversation and to take it out of the dark. It's a private pandemic. If we look at the statistics from the World Health Organization, 1 in 4 people are going to be impacted by mental health in their life. And 1 in 4. Here in the UAE, the statistics actually tell you it's 1 in 3. So we're in a room. I always do this audience participation thing. Look around the people around you. Who is it? Who has it been? Or who will it be? We can't escape this. It's just part of life.
Absolutely.
And my sort of mission started when I looked down on the body of my father, who was a very successful CEO, who never talked about his feelings, never lent into his own mental health. And then at the age of 68, had a mental health breakdown and drank himself to death in 3 months. And we had never had a conversation. He had a good life. He had a good life. But I remember looking down on his body going, we never had a conversation about it. It's time to start talking about it. It's time to start talking to yourself, Scott. Which it was only the final point I want to come on to, which is we're doing a men's mental health retreat soon, Mental, and we've tied up with a retreat in Ras Al Khaimah. We are terrible as men at talking about our mental health. And again, if you look at the statistics from 40 to 49, 50, again, one of the biggest killers of men is suicide.
Yeah.
You have talked about opening up, and you've been very open today. What do we need to say to men to go, do you know what? It is okay. Because every time I sit down with guys, you get them on a one-to-one basis. Soon, mental health, challenges, struggles, they come out. But as a society, we can't talk about it because we're deemed to be weak. I know there was a book recently that talked about called The Boy, the Horse, the Mole, and the Fox. And one of the great phrases in that book with my daughter's reading is, what's the bravest thing you've ever said? And the horse replies, help. asking for help isn't weakness. I just want to get your thoughts finally, or any learnings
I think
for men to talk about.
Look, when people start asserting those alpha male principles, which is, you can't show your emotions, you have to be stoic and all that. I rail that viciously against it. I say that is weakness. If you want to know weakness, it's putting the mask on. Right. Okay, strength is coming out with it. And so when you come out and you say, I'm hurt or I'm concerned or I'm whatever, this is a sign of strength. And that's what we have to do as a society, is reward people for taking those stands. And I'm seeing society do that. There was a time on a Simone Biles in the Olympic Games in gymnastics, or Naomi Osaka, where the world would say she abandoned her team, you abandon your team, stuff. The predominance was, this took a lot of guts to do that, and we applaud it. We applaud it completely. This is what we have to do as a society. Say, when people come and say, I need help, reward it.
I mean, the Simone Biles example has sat with me for a long time, because, when she has the courage to step out and talk about it, that's incredible. What surprised me so much was just how much backlash there was, considering this is one of the most decorated Olympians of all time. And if you know anything about her backstory, you know just what that woman has gone through to get to where she was. And the minute she turned around to ask for help, society, or certain segments of society,
there was also strong support. But I think if she had done that in 72, it would have been 99% negative. What I saw, I didn't do like a massive research, but I read certain posts. It looked to me like over half support. And there was definitely the people that were,
and that's the guys
busting her head.
That's the guys on social media again who were there just anonymously.
And so, but the vast majority, or the majority, was behind her. And I take that positive. I mean, you're obviously never going to get 100% concurrence on any subject.
Last question. You've been super generous with your time, and this has been such a powerful conversation. And thank you for being so honest. One question you didn't answer, which was, what do you hope for your 1-year-old coming into the world of work? Or what gives you optimism looking forward to when your 1-year-old boy, girl?
It's a girl.
Girl. So with everything we're talking about equity right now, where do you think we're going to be when your girl enters the world of work?
It'll be certainly a better world in terms of gender equality than a world that I grew up in, and I feel good about that. I do worry deeply about the social media impacts and the getting truth and fake news and the bullying effects. What I hope to be able to do is to do as good a job as like my father and mother did, which was equip her with the self-confidence and the belief that there's a certain insulation effect of that. And I continually always reflect on, what did my parents do? Because I never, I remember wearing pink shirts and people giving me trouble 40 some years ago. And I would say, I don't care what you say. And it never, whatever my father and mother did, they allowed me. I always went my own way. And the teasing never got me. And in fact, the bullies would just leave me alone, because they said, like, he doesn't react. This is no fun. So I'm fascinated on what they did, and I believe in her, and I want her to believe in herself and to be everything she wants to be and to chase her dreams. And that I will do everything in my power to equip. But I don't have a vision for her, and that's why I think you get into issues when parents say, well, you have to be a doctor. Because I want you to be, and I've always wanted a doctor. I want you to be happy. I want you to chase your purpose and passion. And I'll be proud of you, whether that's being a journalist or that's being an artist, or, if you look at my grown kids, they're all doing completely different. I don't mind. I didn't say I want to have a bunch of lawyers so I can brag at parties and say, yeah, I have 4 lawyers. That was never an objective. I want happy kids that make the most of their life, and they improve this world a little bit, because that's my personal mission. I just want to leave this place a little bit better than I found it. And we all have an impact. Some people make it worse, some people do nothing, and some make it a little bit better. I'm just trying to do my part that someone can say someday, because Lafferty was here, the world's a little bit of a better place. And I want them to do the same and to be happy doing it and feel the fulfillment. I'll try to equip her as best I can as a father to be able to insulate herself from those negative forces that are out there.
Leave the world a better place than you found it. That really feels like a mic drop moment. You've been super generous with your time. James Lafferty, thank you very much for joining us on the Mental Space today. If you enjoyed this conversation and it's been incredibly powerful, please remember to keep tuning into the Mental Space, hit subscribe, follow us on the podcast platform of choice, or of course we're on YouTube as well. James, thank you so much.
Thank you.